Hello and welcome to your one-stop for vehicle repair, restoration, and everything automotive. This is Bird's Garage. Today in Bird's Garage, we're going to start on this brand new project car. It's a 1965 Mustang. Now, as you can see, this car needs a full restoration and some extensive sheet metal repair and replacement. Because of this, though, we got this car really cheap, but I'll be the first to admit it's not for a novice. Unfortunately, this Mustang sat in a farmer's field for a while. The elements have really gotten to it. But that's okay because the aftermarket really supports these cars. You can basically rebuild it with some parts out of a catalog and some clicks in the computer. Not quite sure what direction we're going to take this car right now. We can go with the full factory restoration, make it a resto mod, or even go all out full custom. The possibilities are really endless, but we got a lot of work ahead of us before we start making those types of decisions. Before we start cutting the car apart though, we got some important prep work to do to make sure the restoration work comes out flawlessly. And we're going to get started on that right now by aligning both doors to the car. Okay, so you're probably already asking yourself, why the heck is he going to go ahead and align the doors right now when he's just going to go ahead and finish tearing all the car apart and cut it up? Well, the doors are going to serve as an important alignment tool for hanging the new sheet metal. As an example, take a look at these horrible door gaps right now. If we were to cut off the quarter panels and try to match them up to the doors, they'd be really out of whack because these gaps are so far off. Also, I believe from looking over the car that the quarter panels and the doors are actually original to the car. So again, they make a great tool to make sure the sheet metal hangs correctly and in the correct factory positions. Before we can align the doors though, we have a big issue we have to take care of, and that is the door pins and the bushings are bad. These current sloppy door hinges we have right now are never going to allow us to achieve the nice, crisp, factory-type door gaps that we're looking for. So right now we're going to go ahead, we're going to remove all the door hinges from the car, and we're going to start tearing them down. So you can see over here on the bench, I already went ahead and I took the hinges apart, I tore them down and laid them here on the table. What I also did is I took all the pieces, old and new, and I laid them on so you could see the comparisons. Now when you tear these hinges down, there's one pin, which is the main pin here, that you have to remove from the upper hinge, and the best way I found to do that was to take a socket under the pin and then put a punch from the top and just hit away, and the hammer eventually frees itself. When you do that, then these two halves then will separate. This is actually the upper hinge. The lower hinge has a few more pins in it, and what those do is the one pin holds this cam type mechanism on, and there's a spring in it here, and both of these springs are very common. They break, and because they rust or do whatever from so many cycles, they actually pop out. And I think there were some pieces left in there if I remember, but I just threw them out. I don't have them. But what this does is a cam where the door won't swing open right away as soon as you open it. This gives it a nice gradual open, and these two cams here serve as those. If you ever push the door open, you got kind of like two steps. You got like a half step, and then a whole step. You're gonna open up the door all the way, and that's it. That's what this serves here. And this takes a lot of wear over time. This should be replaced. In fact, you can see if I match them up, you can see the silver there from the bottom versus the top. You can see how much wear these things actually go through. Then same process with that pin for the detent. Just put a socket around the head, take a punch, keep hammering it away until it gets removed. So those other pins I talked about that had to be removed is this little roller here, which actually fits on this cam. And the best way I found to do this was take a die grinder and just put some slices in it, and then put the hinge in a vise and just keep tapping on it until it starts to come out. Here. So right now we're going to go ahead and start putting these hinges back together. So to get all the new parts to rebuild these hinges, I just went ahead and I bought a door hinge repair kit for a 65 Mustang. You can find these anywhere on the internet, places that have restoration parts. They're pretty common to find. So it gives you everything you need in order to rebuild these hinges. So I'm going to get started with that by putting these new bushings into the door hinges. Now these are pretty straightforward. They have a larger hole where that bushing's going to go. Now to get the old bushing out, what I did is I just took a punch, put it in the hole, and kind of caught the edge where it would be and pop it out. Sometimes they stick in there and they get really thin, like that one, and you can actually take a little bit smaller drill bit and just even put it in a vise. I wouldn't use a drill, and kind of work it so it gets thinner and thinner, and eventually it'll come out. Now what I find with a lot of old cars, and even some new cars that have these heavy type hinges, is sometimes that bushing goes bad and this pin wears, and it wears right into the door hinge itself. And sometimes you can fix those. What I've done is sometimes I welded material on here and re-drilled it out, but it kind of loses its center. That works in a pinch, or if you have something rare that you can't find. But these actually look really good. There's no wear into there where I thought there would be. I was hoping for the best with these hinges. You'd never know. And everything cleaned up really nice, and they're very acceptable to rebuild. So again, I'm going to get started right now. I'm going to put these bushings in. So I'm going to put this in the vise. And they should just push in. If not, they might need a slight tap with the hammer. You can actually take a C-clamp too and just be real careful with it and push it down that way. So I'm just kind of going to make sure it's even and just tap it in. Definitely that sound, you know it's flush. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do the other three, and then we can start putting the hinges together. So now that I got the bushings installed, I'm going to go ahead and put the pins in. I'm going to go ahead and do the upper first because it's a little easier, and then we can go ahead and start on the lower one that has that spring mechanism in it. Now I want to get the pin in the exact spot that the factory had it. So what I'm going to do is look for where these metal serrations were that causes an interference fit when it's in the hole so it doesn't slide back out. And I see those on this area of the hole, so that's the way I make sure I'm going to put the pin in. I'm going to drive it in and then pound the pan head flush so it's against there. Now you can put this together wrong, and I just know from looking at the other side that it's actually supposed to be installed. It's supposed to be installed like this, so it's together and flush with the car. So we're going to go ahead and put the pin in right now, then we'll go ahead and jump on the lower. Before I go ahead and do this, I'm going to actually use white lube. I'm going to white lube the bushings, and then I'm going to do the pin before I put it in. So when I get these all rebuilt, I actually want to seal them in epoxy primer, and I'll wipe them all down, then wax grease remover, hang them up, and then I'll spray them. But you always want to put some lube on these. So actually I got to get the other side. So, and again, when it's in the car, if I put these together wrong, I put them together backwards, it sits like this. So you just want to get it till the holes line up. You can be careful with these because you can actually crack those bushings. And I'm going to go ahead and get the pin in. Once you get it somewhat there, the pin will guide itself in the hole. Like that. So now I got as far as I can go. I want to take it out. I want to put something heavy under here so I'm not just hitting against the hinge, so I can go ahead and seal this pin flush properly. It ended up being a little longer than the original, so I actually had to use my socket trick to put under there, pound the head down, seat it flush, and it's fine. This one's all done. I got to go on to the other one. Make sure it turns nice, which it does. Got a nice feel to it. Really didn't get much grease except around there. Now on to our lower. Okay, as you can see, I just finished. I put all three pins into the lower hinge. I put the little roller in here. I put the cam in for the spring. And then I also, of course, drilled the main pin. So now we're going to go ahead and do the hardest part of this job. And that is trying to get this spring in right here. Because if you look, it's not going to go. So if you have like a small engine valve spring compressor, that's perfect for this job. Unfortunately, I do not have one around here in the shop. So I'm going to show you a little trick right now to compress the spring and get it into this area. Okay, so here's how I'm going to compress the spring. I'm going to put it to a vise, and make sure you wear safety glasses while you do this, just in case. And I'm going to compress the spring about that much. Then I'm going to take some heavy MIG welding wire. I'm going to wrap it around and twist it so it keeps the spring collapsed. And then what I'm going to do then is move the spring over to the hinge, cut the wire, and presto, it'll be in position. I got the wire in there, so I'm just gonna compress it more than I need because it's gonna spring back a little bit. Leave it at that, and then I'm gonna do the other side. Now that I got that done, I'm gonna go ahead and put it into the hinge. Okay, so I got my hinge in the vise and I'm ready to put my spring in. You can see that there's different lengths here of how compressed or expanded the spring's going to be. And you get the widest gap right here. You get the widest distance if you put it in this position. So I got my spring. I'm going to put it in. You can see it goes in really nice now. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut the MIG welding wire, and then it'll be installed. Get my hand out of the way just in case. Just maybe cut this down and make it a little bit thinner to pull out. Like that. And we're done. We got 2 hinges down for the driver's side. Now we got to go ahead and get the passenger side all done. Okay, so I got my hinges all done. They're all been epoxy primed, and now I went ahead and I installed them on this door. We'll do the other door again at a later time. So then when you're going to line the doors, you want to leave those bolts at the hinges. Just leave them a little bit snug. You're going to have to keep loosening them up and then tighten them back. The other thing you want to do is the door striker is right here. That is also critical for this alignment. So you have to unbolt that. You got to leave that a little bit snug too. And that's going to determine a couple different things. First, on this end, it's going to determine our height of where the door sits. So what you want to do is look at this body line here, this body line here, and this line here, and see about the height. And you might have to take that striker in the jamb and move it up or down depending on where it needs to be. Secondly then, that's also going to determine how far out or how in this door sits with this quarter panel. So you're going to do 2 different things on this end, and you're going to do the rest of the alignment then at the hinges. Now this gap here, this gap's actually dependent on these bolts, because that's going to move the door either back to the car or forward to the car. But again, I want to get this area taken care of first of the 2 positions that I just mentioned. This actually looks really good right here. They look really, really close. I do want to get this gap in a little bit more. Just from doing these cars, I know that this gap needs to be a lot tighter and flush into the quarter panel. But you can see here, these gaps, we definitely got to get this door back in. So I'm going to move the striker in now, get this door into position so it's flush with this quarter panel, and then I'm going to start on the other side. Alright guys, I got this gap here a little bit better. Might go a little bit tighter. That'll depend on the fender alignment as well. But it's good enough to work with the quarter panel to make sure we get these gaps and the flush that's nice. You see here though, we still got, that's in a little bit, that's in a lot right here. And there's a twist we can do with the door with these bolts. So I'm going to bolt it and twist the door a little bit, tighten up the gap, and we're getting really close. Hard to see, but I got a really nice gap in here now. I can't get this gap any narrower. The holes are just at their max in the hinge. I've never drilled them. To get this a little tighter, I might have to drill the holes and get this door a little bit more. I'm not going to worry about that right now because I want to play with the fender, which I don't know if I'm going to do that now because I'm probably going to start in the back of the car cutting the quarters off first. But so far though, this has a nice flatness to it. This could come out just a little bit, but I got one more adjustment I need to do before I start looking at that and see how to get these into play. This is really close, but I got to look at this gap all along here now with the rocker and the door bottom edge. And up in the front, it's hanging out a bit, so we have to tuck that in, and that might move these in a little bit different position. So it's just a trial and error. It's very tedious, but it's the best thing to do to make sure that we get this quarter panel sheet metal in a factory correct position and will ensure a flawless restoration. Okay, sorry, it might be a hard story to tell with the camera, but I got the gaps just exactly where I want it. Quarter panel at the bottom of the rocker. The flushness is very, very close. Now these cars weren't perfect built from the factory, but I believe I got really good gaps and flushness over here to start cutting up the quarter panels. So I gotta do the other side, and this part of the project's done. So now that we got our hinges fixed and our doors aligned, we're going to turn our attention to this trunk floor. Now I was bouncing around the internet one day and I scored this entire trunk floor section from a 67 coupe for only $150. Not only is that going to save us a lot of money in the long run, because if you were to buy all those individual parts together, it would cost over $1,000, and plus it's going to save us a lot of labor to have to weld this thing back together. So I've already started taking off some of the brackets and other things that I don't need for a coupe. I've also taken out the tail pan and the outer wheel wells. Those are actually different for a 65 to a 67, but this whole structure that I have down to right now, it's actually all the same from 65 to 68. So we do have a big problem that we got to take care of besides this prep work that we're doing, and then is this trunk drop off here on the driver's side, it's just too far gone. It's got a lot of rod in the bottom of it, and it's got to also have a bend to it as well. So right now we're going to start prepping this panel to take it off, and then we're going to have a new panel installed. We're going to prep that and put it back into the car. So look here in comparison, I already got my new panel, and I want to use that to make sure that I know where to cut, and I don't overcut anything, and I don't cut into any other panels that I don't have to. So you can see anything here that's got a flange, that definitely is going to have some spot welds behind it. We're going to have to cut that and find the spot welds. This trunk drop off we don't have to worry too much about. We don't have a quarter panel for it. And definitely over here, this wheel well area, we're going to have some spot welds. And you can see I already cleaned this up, and you can see these spot welds. This is underneath the frame rail. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually drill the spot welds out with a spot weld cutter. We're not going to drill through because in that area I don't want to drill through on the frame. So this is an underside area, and this is the frame rail on the left, and those are where the spot welds are. Now we could drill through the spot welds with just a drill bit, but then we'd have to weld the panel from the frame side, which is very difficult to grind off and clean up those welds. So for most of this job, I'm going to use a spot weld cutter like this. Now to use this tool, what you have to do is you have to have a good center punch. This is an automatic center punch, but any other punch will work. You have to try to find this on the center of the spot weld like this, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to drill through just enough just to break this sheet metal surface, because this tool is so sharp and good, you can actually go through, if you had some, especially if you've got some couple pieces of thin metal you're trying to break apart, you can actually go through both metals and make a hole, kind of like I did here on accident. Alright, so I found the trick to using this tool, because it can walk away from you, is you have to try to keep these teeth as flat to the surface as possible. So that might not mean you're going like this. If you're going to go, this is at an angle right now, if you're going to go straight at it, the tool's probably going to walk away. So you kind of have to match what the panel is in the angle. Now you can start out really slow, trying to get a little bit of cutting, and then you can force it down a little bit more. I think I've broken through right there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I've definitely gone through the panel, and it looks like I've gone to the frame rail, and it's probably as thick as that panel is. So that's what you want to do. Just take it easy, real light, and then try to cut a little bit medium pressure, just enough just so you're cutting through the top panel, and that's it, stop. If you see here, I got a lot more to do, so I'm gonna start working on that. You could follow along a little bit. I'll do some shots back and forth, and then I'll catch up with you when I get this panel off. I'm almost done with everything. I've got holes drilled where they need to go, and using the spot weld cutter, I have them fairly close. I don't want to go any deeper unless I know. Looks like I only made one mistake there. You can see the hole, but I don't want to go any deeper until I know I actually need to do it if it won't separate. So now I want to go ahead all around the panel where I drilled my spot welds out, and I'm gently going to pry off till it pops or it just will release. And if it doesn't do that, I'm going to drill a little bit deeper to get it to come off. And sometimes then you might also need a little helpers. You might need some cold chisels and some other methods. Hammer, of course, and go around this edge and just gently take your time because you don't want to damage the panel behind it. In this case, I'm just going to use some channel locks here and kind of... So that one's going to need a little bit more drilling because it won't break off. I'm just going to keep walking it around until I'm done. Okay, we're almost there. We're nearing the home stretch. Got a few more welds to do. We can get this thing out of here. And here's what we got left. You can see how solid these frame rails are. They're solid all the way through. Most of the metal that was on here, besides this drop-off, was really solid. That's one reason I bought this. And again, 150 bucks. The price was definitely right on that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and clean up any kind of rust. I got to clean up all these spot welds so the metal lays nice and flat. Then over here we've got a little bit of metal left over, and I'm going to hammer and dolly and make sure work all this stuff and make sure it's all flat where it might have got bent a little bit, like right around in here. And once we're done with that, then we can start fitting the new panel. Now you can see here I've worked on this almost probably an hour, but I did a lot of other cleaning that I needed to as well that I want to spray primer on later. So the most important thing right now though is I got this whole framer area cleaned up. I hammered and dollied it, and it's nice and smooth. So now I'm going to go ahead and start fitting the panel. Okay, so if you try to fit these panels, you got to keep in mind these are aftermarket panels. They're not the factory OE panels that you normally can buy with a new car. You can get those. You can find them on the internet. Original Ford stamp panels, but they are quite expensive. This only cost us about $25. We got this from Goodmark, but if you look at probably $100 plus if you're going to try to find an OE type panel. So do the best we can. Sometimes you got to tweak them. You might have to even alter it a little bit, cut some edges off, do a little grinding, make sure this is going to fit perfectly. So we're just going to put it down there and see where we go from there. The most important thing to remember is this panel has to stay flat on this frame rail. And once I kind of see where we're at, I'm actually going to clamp it down in this position. Figure out where we need our hole so we can drill this panel welded to our existing structure here. Actually, we're not doing too bad. Surprisingly, this fits pretty good. It's like we're going to have to push it down right here. And we're going to have to finesse this a little bit, probably push this down and see if we're not going to be bending this panel too much. Oh, I actually missed something. There, I forgot about that little bracket there. It actually fits even better now. we have to be over all the way on this side. So we fit pretty good. We got a little bit of a gap in here. We're just going to pull that up and clamp it after we put our holes in. We have to do a little massaging around in these areas. Other than that, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and start drilling the holes, or figure out where I got to drill the holes, so we can actually fit this panel in properly and start welding it into place. Okay, so matching up our two panels like this. This is our quarter panel area around here. We're going to wait till we do any kind of altering on this. We might have to, from my experience, we have to trim a little bit on this edge before to put the quarter panel next to it. So we're actually going to wait. Just going to lay right in this position once we get it in the car. Looking around here now, this is where I was talking about our frame rails. So I'm not going to replicate every spot weld here, but I am going to drill holes so they have to be in the frame. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to lay this panel back down, and where this frame rail goes through here, I'm actually going to put a marker against the frame rail spot, and I'm going to mark it inside and then drill a hole. I don't know how far I'm going to drill it, maybe about every 3 inches, and go along. And that's how I'm going to get my holes to weld this to the frame. Anything else, like on the edge, around this area and around the edge, we'll have to drill holes in this panel in order to be able to weld that to our existing structure. The only thing we're not going to drill any holes in this panel for is around this area, because this is where our wheel well is going to go, and we already have holes in our wheel well, so we're just going to butt this panel up. But we are going to have to clean off a little bit of this E-coat. Once we get it in place, we'll mark it to where our holes are going to be, so they have a good penetration. We put our welder on there and then fill the hole in, weld that over to our frame rails and our other panels. But other than that, that's the only place I really see we're going to have to not put any holes in the panels, right around here in this wheel well area. So using my old panel for reference, I'm going to try to match the holes as much as I can on the outside flanges. Here now I'm marking so we can get a reference point where our frame rail is, and we can put our holes in on the inside. So here then I'm marking the holes where I need to inside the frame rail. Now I'm going to go ahead and center punch all the holes where I mark the spots. To start now, I'm going to just use a 1/8 drill bit, make a small pilot hole in all the spots. Go ahead and make my final hole, which is a 5/16 drill bit. Clean everything up with a grinder, and now I'm going to go back in and hammer and dolly all those spots that I drilled to make sure they're nice and flat. See, my hole is lined up just where I wanted it, right inside of the frame rail. So right now I'm going to go ahead and finish my cleanup and start prepping to weld this panel into place. Before we lay our panel on for the final time, we want to cover all the bare metal with some weld-through primer. This should guarantee a rust-free repair for the lifetime of these panels. Okay, so that turned out to be a lot more work than I remember, but I finally have our panel fitted and all ready to be welded into place. So our panel still actually fits pretty good. There's some spots where the holes are where it doesn't fit exactly flush onto the frame, and that's the most important thing you want to make sure first. You want to make sure that this is flat to the frame, then we can kind of buckle everything else in. So what I ended up doing is taking these clamps and I put it in the center of the panel, and I put one here and I put one over right in here because it didn't seem at flush, but it is flush in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start welding in the center and work my way outward. Now when you do something like this, you can easily warp this panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld this. I might not weld the hole completely, but I'm going to weld it, and I'll skip over and I'll skip the different spots and work my way out. Then I'll start tightening up the sides, and my last thing is going to be put this wheel well into place. So I just finished with all the welds besides the one on the wheelhouse, and everything looks really good. The panel came in really nice. So after I'm done with the wheelhouse, I'm going to go ahead and clean them all up with a grinder. And then you typically have to go back and, you missed a little bit of the hole and go and weld a little bit more. But other than that, this is shaping up really good. You can see in here I got great penetration on the frame rail. Actually, we get here, what I want to do is I want to start on this edge first and work my way back. Because if I try to weld over here, there's going to be no give over in this area, and you might distort the panel doing that. So I'm going to put a clamp here, weld these down, and just work my way and kind of massage this so it's as flush as I can. It's not going to be super flush. They're not flush from the factory. That's why body caulk was invented. Well, one of the reasons anyways. But I'm going to do that right now, and then we'll be almost done. As you can see, I finally got done grinding all the welds down. It's about as beautiful as I'm going to make them. Not going to be too perfect with them because it is a trunk. You're going to have paint over it, maybe some undercoating, and a trunk mat. But overall, the panel came out really good. I'm really happy with it. What I got to do now is just finish some other cleanup, and we can go ahead and spray some epoxy primer over the whole thing, and we'll be all done with this job. So I still got some holes to fill up in the wheel wells. When I remove the brackets, remember where this came from a coupe and we're going to a Fastback, we got entirely different brackets that we have to attach to our wheel wells. So we're going to go ahead and fill those now. Now, a little trick that I've learned a long time ago that works really good is I have an old piece of copper. I actually have it flattened out right here to put behind holes. And if you do that, the material coming out of the MIG welder will stick into the metal that you're welding into, but it will not stick to the copper. It's a quick, easier way to fill that hole instead of trying to just go with the MIG welder a little bit. You can actually blow through and make the hole a lot bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on that and do it right now. Okay, so the next prep item we're going to do to this car is we're going to take this 1-inch square tubing and we're going to cut it down to size, and we're going to take two different pieces and we're going to weld one side to door jamb, one at this windshield pillar here, and then crisscross the other side and weld the two together. This will keep the car nice and square. So we start cutting it apart. Hopefully we're not going to lose too much of its geometrical position of when the car was first built. I remember when this car was built, it was built with jigs and fixtures and different things that held the car together so it could be welded. But we just don't have that type of equipment. So we have to keep the car as tight as possible with what we have in order so we don't have any issues putting everything back together. So it's really hard to believe, but I actually scored this hood at a local pick and pull junkyard for only 50 bucks. Now it's in really good condition. It's just got a little bit of crease in the front corner where it was hit in, which we're going to take care of right now. So you always want to work something out like this, just want to go ahead and fill it. It's just not good auto body practices. You always want to use the minimal amount of body filler as possible. It's safe you up to about 1/4 of an inch, but again, minimal is the best option for doing this kind of work. Okay, so these are the tools we're going to use for this job. We want to use a straight edge because we want to make sure as we hit that line out that we match the straight line that's already there on the edge of the hood. We want to go beyond that. We want a nice straight across line. We're going to use a nice body hammer like this with a nice flat big head. You can use a regular hammer for this job. I just prefer using the body hammer. We're going to use a body dolly as well. This is a nice hard piece of flat metal. Just going to make sure we bang that edge out, that we're going to, again, make sure we have a nice straight line. You can also use a block of wood if you don't have a dolly. The only problem with the block of wood is you got to be a little more careful with it because this wood is soft and has a little bit of give, the body dolly doesn't. So if you hit that out, you can actually make the line out go out farther than you actually need to. So you just got to be a little bit careful. So right now we're going to move all these tools over to this edge and we're going to start working this dent out. So I'm going to take my body dolly, I'm going to put it basically behind the dent, and I'm going to take my body hammer and I'm going to work the dent towards the center out enough so it's nice and straight with all these other two lines on the side of it. So I had to put some electrical tape on my straight edge because I was getting some glare and you wouldn't be able to see it very good, but you can see now that this dent is mostly worked out and the line is really close, so it's about the best we're going to be able to get it. All it needs now is just a skim coat of filler and this job will be done. Okay, so I've been thinking long and hard. I was trying to think of a name for this project. We couldn't come up with anything, and then it kind of dawned on me. We got to do a lot of surgery to this car and cut it all apart and put it back together. So we're going to call this project Operation Fastback. Okay, so that's going to end today's show. I really don't want to go any farther with this car until I order all the panels I need, and I can start studying them and get a better course of action on how I'm going to cut the old panels off and put the new ones on. So as always, thanks for watching. Good luck with your projects, and remember, it's not a rewarding day unless you get dirty.